Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life when we face situations, relationships, and decisions that leave us uncertain, wondering if they are part of God's plan for us. In these moments, it's vital to remember that God's guidance is both clear and loving, especially when He says, "They're not for you." These words, though they may seem difficult to accept, are not words of rejection or punishment, but words of protection, care, and divine wisdom. You see, God sees the bigger picture of our lives, far beyond what we can see in the moment. He understands the depth of our hearts, the desires we hold, and the path that lies ahead. He knows the people who are meant to walk beside us and those who will hinder our progress in Him. There are relationships, whether personal or professional, that may seem appealing or even necessary at the time, but God, in His perfect love and wisdom, knows that they might lead us astray or cause harm to our spiritual wall. When God says that they're not for you, it is His way of protecting us from relationships that may pull us away from His will. In the scriptures, we see numerous examples of people who were guided by God's wisdom in their relationships. In the Old Testament, God told the Israelites not to make alliances with certain nations because those relationships would lead them to idolatry and spiritual destruction. These instructions were not given out of punishment, but out of God's deep love for His people. He wanted to protect them from going down a path that would lead to their downfall. Likewise, God in His wisdom directs us away from certain relationships, not because He wants to deny us good things, but because He knows that they would not bring us the peace, joy, and growth that come from being aligned with His will. It can be painful to let go of relationships, opportunities, or people that we may feel drawn to, but we must trust in God's plan for our lives. His guidance is always for our good. Sometimes we are so focused on the present that we cannot see the future, and we may feel that we are losing something important. But God's way is always better. He has a purpose for every part of our lives, and when He directs us away from something, it's because He has something greater in store. God's a no is just as loving as His yes. When He says, "They're not for you," He's protecting us from unnecessary heartache, guiding us to relationships that will build us up, and leading us to fulfill the destiny He has planned for us. Trusting in His direction is a step of faith that requires us to surrender our own desires and plans to His perfect will. As we do, we will find that His way is always the best way, and His blessings are far greater than anything we could have imagined. So when God says, "They're not for you," listen, because His love for us is greater than any fleeting desire we may have. God's plan for our lives is greater than anything we could ever imagine. We often find ourselves pursuing things that seem right, but in the grand scheme of things, they may not align with the purpose that God has set out for us. We might seek certain relationships, careers, or opportunities because they feel good in the moment, yet God, in His infinite wisdom, knows what's truly best for us. His plan isn't always immediately clear, and sometimes we must step back and trust Him, especially when He says, "They're not for you." When we trust God's plan, we open ourselves up to experiences and blessings that we could never have predicted or arranged on our own. God's plan is rooted in His love for us. He doesn't want us to settle for anything less than the best He has prepared for us. There will be times in life when people or circumstances seem like the perfect fit, but God, in His perfect wisdom, sees the bigger picture. What may appear to be a good relationship or opportunity might not be what we truly need for our growth, peace, or happiness. It is only when we trust His plan and follow His lead that we begin to understand that His way is always the best way. Even when it's difficult to let go, when God says, "They're not for you," He is leading us away from something that would only bring pain or distraction from His divine purpose. God's plan for our lives is built on His knowledge of our deepest needs and desires. We often think we know what we need, but God sees beyond our present desires and knows what will truly fulfill us. While we may think we're missing out on something, God is protecting us from heartache, from things that would draw us away from His love, or from relationships that would not help us grow in the way He intends. Sometimes the people we are drawn to are not aligned with the future God has for us. Trusting in God's plan means trusting that He knows what is best, even when we don't understand the reasons behind His decisions. He is guiding us toward what will bring us true fulfillment, peace, and joy. And when we allow ourselves to trust him, we position ourselves to receive all that he has in store for us. God's protection is a powerful aspect of his love and care for us. We often find ourselves seeking things that seem appealing, but God, in his infinite wisdom, knows that some things can harm us or lead us away from his perfect will. When God says that they're not for you, it's a message of protection. It's his way of shielding us from relationships, situations, or decisions that could cause harm or heartache down the road. The Bible reminds us that God's plans for us are always good, plans to give us a future and a hope. But that doesn't mean that every path we want to take will be one that leads us closer to his purpose for our lives. Sometimes we want something so badly, but God knows that it would only bring pain, confusion, or distraction from what he has prepared. Our human understanding is limited. We often cannot see what God sees, nor can we always understand why certain things are being withheld from us. But when we trust God's protection, we accept that he knows what's best. Just as a parent would protect their child from dangerous situations, God does the same for us. He protects us not only from physical harm, but also from emotional, mental, and spiritual harm. Sometimes the people we desire in our lives may not be the right fit for us. They might not support us in the way we need, or their influence might pull us away from God's will. In these moments, God's protective hand is guiding us to safety, even when we don't understand the reasons behind his guidance. It's important to trust that God's protection is a gift, not a burden. When we choose to follow his leading, even when it's hard to let go, we are acknowledging that his love for us is greater than our own desires. God's protection ensures that we are kept from the things that would harm us, and in doing so, he is ultimately positioning us to walk in his purpose. When he says, they're not for you, he is opening up the way for something greater, something that aligns with his perfect will for our lives. This protection is not about denying us what we want, but about guiding us toward what we truly need, even if it's not what we expected. In the end, God's protective love is one of the most profound ways he demonstrates his care for us, leading us to peace, fulfillment, and growth in him. God's wisdom is far beyond our understanding, and his perspective on our lives is much broader than our own. Often we find ourselves desiring things or people that seem good, even right, but God, in his perfect wisdom, sees the potential dangers that we may not be able to recognize. When God says, they're not for you, it is a clear indication that his wisdom is guiding us away from something that would ultimately hinder our spiritual growth or lead us away from his best for us. We may not understand the reasons in the moment, but it's important to remember that God's wisdom is never wrong. His decisions are always rooted in a deep love for us, even when they go against our own desire. Trusting in God's wisdom means acknowledging that he knows the path we need to take, even if it's not the path we would have chosen for ourselves. In our limited human perspective, we often find it difficult to see beyond the present moment. We focus on our desires, our immediate needs, and the things that seem to bring us happiness. However, God's wisdom goes much deeper. He knows the plans he has for us, and he sees the long-term impact of the decisions we make today. Sometimes we want something so desperately that we fail to recognize the potential consequences. But God, in his infinite wisdom, protects us from those things that would ultimately harm us. It may be a relationship that seems perfect but would eventually bring pain, or a situation that appears to offer success but would ultimately lead to emptiness. When God says, they're not for you, he is saving us from that emptiness and guiding us towards something far greater. God's wisdom is not always understood in the moment, but it is always evident in the fruit it bears. When we look back on our lives, we often see how God's decisions were the best ones, even when they didn't make sense at the time. God's wisdom leads us to peace, fulfillment, and spiritual growth. When we trust that his guidance is always for our good, we can have confidence that his plans for us are greater than anything we could have envisioned for ourselves. God's wisdom is a gift, and when we listen to it, we align ourselves with the very best that he has for us. God's love is unwavering and unconditional, and it is the foundation of everything he does for us. When he says they're not for you, it is an expression of that deep love. Many times we find ourselves drawn to people, situations, or desires that we believe are meant for us. But God, in his infinite love, knows what is truly best for us. While we may feel disappointment or confusion in the moment, we must trust that his love is protecting us from something that may not align with the fullness of his plan. Just as a loving parent guides their child away from harmful choices, God's love directs us away from things and people that may cause us harm in ways we cannot yet understand. God's love is not about withholding good things from us, but about ensuring that we are placed in positions where we can grow, thrive, and live in alignment with his will. Sometimes we think we know what's best for ourselves, but God sees the bigger picture. He knows what will bring us lasting peace and true joy. When he says if they're not for you, he is removing the distractions or potential heartaches that could interfere with our purpose. God's love for us is so vast that he will not allow us to settle for less than what he has planned. His guidance, even when it feels difficult or painful, is a manifestation of his protective love for us. When God redirects us, it's because he knows that his plan for us is greater than anything we could ever imagine. His love for us goes beyond our own desires and aims to lead us into a life of fulfillment, peace, and purpose. Sometimes the relationships or opportunities we are drawn to may seem like the right fit, but they are not in alignment with what God wants for us. His love, therefore, removes those things from our path, not because he wants to punish us, but because he is preparing us for something better. Trusting in God's love means trusting in his timing, his wisdom, and his perfect plan for our lives. God's love never fails, even when his decisions challenge us or lead us to let go of things we thought we wanted. It is always in our best interest. He loves us enough to guide us away from anything that could hinder our spiritual growth or rob us of the joy he has planned. When we embrace his love and trust that his choices for us are always good, we open ourselves up to the blessings and purposes he has prepared. His love will always lead us to what is best for us, even when we don't fully understand the reasons behind his guidance. God's timing is perfect and his ways are far beyond our understanding. When he says they're not for you, it's not a rejection of what we want, but a reflection of his divine timing and plan. We often rush into relationships or situations thinking that now is the right time, but God in his perfect wisdom sees the full picture. He knows what lies ahead, and he understands the timing needed for our lives to align with his will. Sometimes we're too focused on our desires and want things to happen immediately, but God's timing is always about what is best for us. It may not feel like it in the moment, but his decisions are made with our long-term growth and well-being in mind. When we don't see the immediate benefit of God's timing, it can be easy to question his plan. But the truth is, God is always working behind the scenes, orchestrating events in a way that will ultimately lead to greater fulfillment. We might feel frustrated when doors seem closed or when relationships that we thought would work out fall apart. But God is protecting us. His timing allows us to grow in ways that we may not even realize until later. It's during these moments of waiting or confusion that we are being shaped, refined, and prepared for the greater blessings he has in store. If we were to rush ahead of his timing, we might miss the lessons we need to learn. Or worse, we might find ourselves in situations that derail us from his greater purpose. God's timing also teaches us patience and trust. Trusting God means surrendering our need to control every aspect of our lives. It means allowing him to lead us, even when we don't understand why certain things are happening or not happening. His delays are not denials. They are part of his perfect plan. And in his timing, everything will fall into place as it should. When we look back on the moments where God said, they're not for you, we will often realize that those moments were pivotal in guiding us towards something far better. Something that we could not have seen or understood in the moment. Trusting in God's timing is an act of faith. And it is through this trust that we find true peace in the midst of uncertainty. God is always at work in our lives, even when we cannot see it. When he says, they're not for you, it's not a rejection, but a redirection. We may find ourselves attached to things, relationships, or paths that seem appealing, but God knows what is truly best for us. Often we hold on tightly to our desires, thinking they are the right ones, but God in His infinite wisdom knows the future. He sees beyond the immediate and understands the long-term effects of every choice. His redirection is not about denying us happiness, but about guiding us to something better, something more aligned with His divine purpose for us. There are moments in life when we feel rejected or disappointed because things don't unfold the way we envisioned. These feelings are natural, but it's important to remember that God's purpose is always greater than our own understanding. When God says they're not for you, it's a sign of His love and protection. His desire for us is to walk in His perfect will, where we can experience true peace, fulfillment, and joy. Sometimes we become so focused on what we want that we cannot see the greater things God has prepared for us. His redirection is a form of His care for us, ensuring we are not led down a path that could cause pain or lead us away from His purpose. God's redirection is often an invitation to trust Him more deeply. It's a call to release our own desires and align ourselves with His plan. His plan is always for our good, even when it doesn't match what we initially wanted. His timing and direction are perfect, and when we let go of our control, we open ourselves up to experience the fullness of His blessings. We are often unable to see the bigger picture in the moment, but God, in His grace, reveals the beauty of His plan in His perfect time. As we trust in His redirection, we are learning to rely on His wisdom and guidance, knowing that He is leading us towards something greater than we could have imagined. God's love for us is unchanging, and His desire for our lives is always rooted in what is best for us. When He says they're not for you, it is not out of anger or disappointment, but out of His care and concern for our future. We may be tempted to hold on to people or situations that we believe are right for us, but God, in His infinite wisdom, sees what we cannot see. He understands the deeper needs of our hearts and knows what we truly need to grow and thrive. His redirection is not a punishment. It's a sign of His protection. He is keeping us from paths that may lead to hurt, confusion, or a life that is not in alignment with His will. It can be difficult to understand why God would remove certain people or opportunities from our lives, especially when we have invested so much time, energy, and emotion. We may feel confused or even betrayed. But the truth is that God's love for us surpasses our own understanding. His wisdom far exceeds our own. And when He says, they're not for you, it is because He knows that something better is in store. We may not always see it in the moment, but the divine redirection is part of His greater plan. It's through trusting in His will and timing that we find peace in the midst of disappointment. God's love also calls us to let go of control. We often try to force things to happen, believing that we know best, but God's love invites us to surrender our will and trust in His plan. When we release our tight grip on our own desires, we open ourselves to receive the blessings He has already prepared for us. Sometimes God removes certain people or circumstances from our lives to make room for what He truly wants to bring us. He is not punishing us, but rather clearing the way for something greater, something that will lead us into deeper relationship with Him. In trusting God's love, we come to understand that His plan for us is always far better than anything we could have planned ourselves. Though the path may be unclear at times, God's redirection is a sign of His care. And as we follow His lead, we will see that His plans for us are filled with hope, peace, and the promise of a future far greater than we could ever imagine. When God says they're not for you, it's a statement of divine protection and guidance. In our human nature, we often find ourselves drawn to things or people that seem to promise happiness or fulfillment. We convince ourselves that this is the path we must take, the relationship we need, or the opportunity that will complete us. But God, in His infinite wisdom, sees beyond the surface. He understands the intricacies of our hearts, our desires, and our purpose. His love for us compels Him to steer us away from what might harm us, even when we can't see the danger in the moment. God's no is not a rejection, but a redirection towards something better, something aligned with His plan for our lives. There are times when it feels like we are at a crossroads, torn between what we desire and what we know God might be leading us away from. It's in these moments that we are called to trust His judgment above our own. Our understanding is limited. We see only what is right in front of us. But God, in his eternal wisdom, sees the path that lies ahead. He knows the hearts of those around us, the impact that certain choices will have on our spiritual growth, and the purpose he has set before us. When he says, "Oh, they're not for you," he is not denying us good things, but rather protecting us from things that would hinder our growth, peace, and ultimate joy. It's easy to question God's decisions when we are faced with disappointment, confusion, or even heartache. But this is where faith comes into play. Faith in God's love means trusting him when things don't make sense. It means believing that his wisdom is greater than our own desires and that he is always working for our good, even in moments of hardship. God's love is constant, and when he removes something or someone from our lives, he is clearing the space for something that is truly in alignment with our purpose. We may not understand it now, but in hindsight, we often see that his redirection was a divine intervention that saved us from heartache and led us to a better place. Trusting in God's will means surrendering our own control. It requires us to let go of what we think is best and allow God to guide us according to his perfect plan. Even when his answers are not what we expect, we can be assured that he is working behind the scenes for our ultimate good. His no is simply a pathway to a deeper relationship with him, where we experience his love, his guidance, and the peace that comes from trusting his will for our lives. When God says, "It's not for you," it is an invitation to trust in his perfect timing and plan for our lives. Often we find ourselves attached to people, opportunities, or situations that seem right at the moment, but God, in his infinite wisdom, knows the future. He understands that some things or people might not be part of his greater plan for us, and his decision to remove them is always for our own good. It is not a rejection of who we are or what we deserve, but a reflection of his love for us. Just as a parent might prevent their child from going down a dangerous path, God lovingly protects us by guiding us away from what could harm us in the long run. In moments of confusion, when doors close or relationships dissolve, it's easy to feel lost or abandoned. However, God's decisions are never made in haste or out of malice. When he says that they're not for you, it's not because he is withholding something good, but because he is guiding us towards something far greater than we could imagine. We may not understand it at the time, but his ways are higher than ours, and he is orchestrating events that we may not fully comprehend. The things that seem to be slipping away are often the very things that would have hindered our growth, peace, and fulfillment in the long term. God's protection is always active in our lives, even when we don't recognize it. What might seem like a loss in the moment is often a divine opportunity to grow, learn, and prepare for something better. His no is not about punishment, but about redirecting our lives toward his perfect will. Trusting in God's plan means recognizing that his love for us is constant, and he is always working for our good. His redirection is not a setback, but a setup for greater things to come. It can be challenging to accept when God says, "Oh, they're not for you," especially when our hearts are deeply invested in a situation. But we are called to trust in his wisdom and his timing, knowing that he sees the bigger picture. Each time God closes a door, he is opening a new one that will lead us to the purpose he has set for us. As we trust him and surrender our own desires, we find peace in the knowledge that his plan is always better than anything we could have imagined for ourselves. When God says, "They're not for you," it is a message of love and care, even if it feels like a moment of loss or confusion. Many times we find ourselves wanting something, pursuing a relationship, a job, or a certain path, believing it will bring us fulfillment or joy. However, God, in his infinite wisdom and understanding of what is truly best for us, sees beyond what we can grasp in the moment. His wisdom is far greater than ours, and he knows what will help us grow and what could cause us harm. When he says that they're not for you, it's because he is guiding us towards something greater, something that aligns perfectly with his purpose for our lives. It can be difficult to accept God's redirection, especially when our desires are deeply rooted. We may feel like we've worked so hard for something, or that a relationship is exactly what we need to be happy. Yet, God sees the bigger picture. He knows how certain situations or people can affect our peace, our growth, and our future. When he removes something from our lives, it is not an act of punishment, but a display of his protection. He loves us enough to say no to things that could prevent us from becoming who He created us to be. This is where our faith and trust in God come into play. When we let go of our own desires and trust that He is in control, we open ourselves up to the plans He has for us. His plans are always for our good, even when we don't understand them. God's timing is perfect, and though we may feel disappointment in the moment, we are often being saved from a situation or path that would ultimately lead to heartache. His no is a gentle redirection, steering us towards something better and more aligned with His purpose for our lives. In trusting God's direction, we acknowledge that His love and wisdom are far greater than anything we can imagine. Though His choices for us might not align with our expectations, they are always for our ultimate benefit. The relationships, opportunities, and paths that are truly meant for us will come at the right time. And when they do, we will see clearly that God's timing and decisions were always right.